aside from my parents, I feel most formed by Creighton University. And the type of Jesuit I am is because of Creighton and the way that I'm here. I feel like the added value that I provide is not um, being an administrator or wonderful teacher. It's just being a person who's here, being with students.
Welcome into From the Mall, a podcast where we share stories from the Creighton community that showcase achievements and impact. I'm your host, John Niatawa. In this episode, we sit down with Father Jeff Sullivan, Society of Jesus. Father Sullivan reflects on the Jesuit tradition at Creighton University, the importance of presence and community, and how fostering meaningful relationships continues to shape the university's mission. He's also a proud Creighton graduate. We're happy to welcome Father Jeff Sullivan, Society of Jesus, here today to talk about a number of topics. But I want to start with something maybe a little bit more heavy. I don't know. That's probably not what you're supposed to do as an interviewer. You're supposed to start with softballs.
Love it.
Like, I'm thinking about as I'm walking this morning and walking through campus, and I think about sort of what the heart of the Creighton mission is and the fabric of the culture of this institution. And the Jesuit community is such a big part of it and has been for years since the inception of Creighton.
Yeah.
Is that a responsibility that does that feel like weighty to you, just to think about all the Jesuits who have made such an impact in people's lives, and now here you are
Yeah.
doing the same thing?
Wow. That is as the students like to joke, I always say heavy, deep, and real. That's a heavy, deep, and real question.
I'm glad this morning that I could set you up.
Yeah, maybe the background would be that I feel I went to Creighton, so I feel very honored to be a part of this tradition and to be invited back. Do I feel a responsibility? Yeah, if I'm being a little honest, I think that when I was here, there were 70 men on campus and professors, and now we're about 20, 25. And some of the great Jesuits that were here when I was here have either gone to the retirement community or are in their 80s. Larry Gillick, Greg Carlson, these men that are giants, at least in Omaha, in terms of Ignatian spirituality. And I do feel that this place really loves Jesuits and really wants us to be involved. And I think that it caught my attention when a couple of other Jesuits were talking about the role that I have here in campus ministry. And I always thought that the power of the Jesuits or the influence, let me say better, the influence of the Jesuits was in the classroom. But I think really being present to the people is where we've gotten a lot of our influence. And so I try to make myself available. We have this beautiful new community that is built for hosting, and I guess I feel a little bit of a obligation to share the gift of this fantastic space with the larger Creighton community by inviting uh, students and colleagues. So, yeah, I guess I never thought of it articulated quite that way, but I do think that maybe what I feel is that the Creighton community wants Jesuits to be a part of this institution, wants to be a part of their lives. And responding to that is something I feel like I want to do, not as a carrying on the Creighton brand, but as building a relationship and community here.
And yeah, well, maybe responsibility wasn't the right word, but it's this. There's that certain legacy that's attached to sort of the impact that Jesuits have here, and I know it's different for every person, every Jesuit, and it's different for every student or faculty or staff member who interacts with the Jesuit community. But there's just something about it. Hey, Creighton's a Jesuit institution. We know that, but it just feels like when I think about the impact that Jesuits have, it just seems rather significant here.
Yeah, and maybe one other anecdote I could add is I feel a little bit like like a dad that needs to show up for things. Like I need to show up for all the events and go to all the games and be at all the things to let people know that they matter, and it matters to students. showing up for like the Alpha Sigma Nu induction, or there's a woman who just had a baby who invited me to come and be there and be present. Or I was just out at Denver this weekend to go to a wedding for somebody that I met for spiritual conversation for a couple of years. And so uh, they would have been okay had I not shown up, but showing up really matters. And I think that that's an ethos that I feel like to be a steward of this place and to show up for people in the big moments of their life.
Well, and I mean, one of the neat things is I get to experience this too as an employee, but I work here on campus, but we interact with students who it's such a transformative moment for them in their lives. What maybe that's one is that one of the reasons that drew you to education, drew you to the college campus? I mean, I think that your vocation of ministry and you know you could do a lot of things. I guess is my thought,
Oh,
and you're here on campus making an impact. As saying what saying that fellow Jesuits who are here too. I mean, they could make an impact in a lot of ways in
sure,
our communities and our societies, but you're here on campus.
sure.
Why is that?
Yeah, maybe a little backstory is I had never actually intentionally planned to be in higher ed, let alone Creighton University. I think when I left Creighton as a student in those first couple years out of college, I was really attuned to the missionary work. In fact, I always thought I would be a missionary. I was very heavily influenced by men like Father Greg Boyle, who has the ministry out in Los Angeles, working with formerly incarcerated gang members, uh, homeboys industry. There were other Jesuits throughout the world who were doing these very magnanimous, world beater sort of things, and I guess I thought that that's what Creighton had formed me for. And throughout formation, it's funny. I went from volunteering in Ecuador and on a reservation, and now I'm working in our traditional high schools, and now here at Creighton. Wasn't something I ever imagined or planned for myself. I guess I always imagined I would do these huge world changing things, and I think it's amazing what God's wisdom is, and God sent me back to Creighton, and I at first I was a little was like, what am I doing going back to Creighton? But it makes sense in that uh, this is the place I feel of, aside from my parents, I feel most formed by Creighton University. And the type of Jesuit I am is because of Creighton and the way that I'm here. I feel like the added value that I provide is not um, being an administrator or wonderful teacher. It's just being a person who's here, being with students. And then, as you mentioned, um, many of them are struggling is not the right word, but being confronted with these questions of who am I? To start with, what am I going to do with my life? I mean, I think college really necessitates, and there's a lot of pressure. Am I going to be a doctor? Am I going to be a lawyer? How am I going to make money? How am I going to have a family? And even me saying that, I feel the intensity and weight of those questions on them. And so to go on a retreat and to actually, for the first time, ask a question like, what am I doing with my life, or who am I becoming? Do I actually enjoy this? Whose dreams am I living out? What types of relationships do I find most valuable? And I think what I provide in my goofy sort of way is a place of safety where they don't feel the weight of those questions that maybe an institution might be asking or an admissions board might be asking. They are able to rest in those questions. And I think that that's a privilege I get to do by having this job. And certainly I run retreats and there's administrative, but the real magic where I feel like the spirit shows up is just in the conversation that I have with another.
And well, you kind of laid it out a little bit, your own path.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if you necessarily had a plan per se, but as you mentioned, students on campus when you're in college, you're thinking about what is my plan, what is next.
Yeah.
Um, and it didn't necessarily go the way you would have thought at age 21, 22, 23.
No, that's right.
So I don't know, maybe this do you find yourself referencing sort of your experience to help others through theirs? I mean, I think of me at age 21, 22. I probably thought I had everything worked out and I'm going to be here by age 30 and here by age 40. And life
Good
doesn't
point.
work like that. God doesn't work like that.
And not to get overly theological, but you and I, John, we had a conversation a couple days ago about this notion of God's plan. And I had a conversation with with two students, very lovely young women, and we were in the car going out to Paxton, Nebraska for choir pilgrimage. And in the conversation, they asked about uh, God's plan and does God have a plan? And later, having a conversation with that same woman about, you know, our whole lives are planned out from the age of we're 5, we're going to school, we're going to kindergarten, we're going into grade school, then we're going to high school. And for many, myself included, college is the next thing, and that's what you do. And so when you hit 21, 22, there is no plan in the same way that's been crafted. So
The
I
way
think
that's been crafted by others.
by others now. So
You're looking at yourself, basically.
and so I think what has been modeled in the way that our families, especially for those that are college pedigree, where their parents went to college and their parents were like, "You're gonna do this too." I think that we also conflate God's plan with the plan that others have put. So then it comes to a question, does God have a plan for me? And do I have to have it figured out at 21, 22, as you mentioned? Uh, and I think the answer is that God and us plan together, or better said, we dream together. And can we allow ourselves to dream? I like to think that maybe I'm theologically incorrect, but they're multiverses. I could walk through door A and this would be my life, and I could walk through door B and this could be my life, and I could walk through door C and this could be my life. And more important is not which door I walk through, but is God going to walk through it with me as I continue to open and close doors? And that's the thing that I think is really hard. And I think especially with a generation of people who are so much about achievement and accomplishing that, uh, we wanna make other people proud and family and friends and yet, um and so we think about that with God, like, if I do this, God will be proud of me, or this is what God wants, and if I don't live up to this dream, is God gonna be disappointed? And I think in our realist moments, if we're really close to God, can we just see that God's accompanying us and God has hopes and dreams, but regardless of what we choose or do, that's more important. That's really hard to swallow, and I think it's really hard to feel all the time in a generation where achievement is so important.
I've had this conversation with friends and family before. I think there's this quick story in the Bible, Genesis, I think, where Abraham and Lot, their families have to separate.
Yes, that's right.
Moment where Abraham sort of God brings him to a top of the hill and says, like, look to the east, to the north, to the south. So it's like, wherever you go, I'm going to be with you. I always found that to be really powerful and helpful for me as I like took paths and into the unknown,
That's
but
right.
knowing that, hey, stick to your faith and believe that God is sort of going to walk with you and it'll be okay. Easier said than done,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, and maybe some insider baseball on that, the story of Ruth and Naomi, where Naomi and Ruth, their husbands have all died, and Naomi's old of age, and it's like, you can go back home and start your life because 'cause you're still young and you can have a family, and Ruth's like, "I'm gonna stay with you," and I think that speaks to God's it's a metaphor and allegory to God's fidelity to us, that God's not gonna abandon us, and so, yeah, I think maybe to ground it in what we're doing here at Creighton, I think that that's what I want to communicate to students, is that wherever you go, God is gonna be present, and hopefully what is more important than what you do or what you achieve, that the way in which you live your life, especially with these Jesuit values, that's what people are going to remember. People aren't going to remember what business you okay, maybe some, but like, or how much you earned, or what you you gave in terms of money. What they will remember is the moment that you were riding in a car with them and like playing dumb 80s music, or uh, being with them when they broke up with their boyfriend or girlfriend, or being with them when the death of a family member happens. That's the real stuff, and I think that that's where God is really most present. And so, how can we teach and how can we form students so that they live out the moduses in those moments, secure personalities in those moments, the men and women formed with others are in those moments over and above, like, I am the world's best, fill in the blank. Yeah.
It's interesting. I haven't like walked campus with you, but I've been around you enough to know that um, you will engage pretty much with anyone, students. Is that just sort of natural for you? I mean, seriously, before we went up to the elevator today, you were sitting there talking to a student. Another student walked by and said,
Yeah.
"I think he called you Sully."
He did. He called me Sully. Yeah, man.
Says, "Hey, Sully, I'm going to text you later because I want to
Yeah, well,
talk to you."
and maybe that's the problem, that I have. I can never seem to get anything done. But I would say that started when I was a student here at Creighton. I used to sit on the benches out on the lawn, and I remember my friends joking about, "Is all you ever do is just sit and read books and talk to people?" Um, I think that that's something I would say, to be honest, that got away from me a lot until I came back here to Creighton, and I think that while this place necessitates a sort of doing and achievement, I do feel like people are willing to stop and make time for each other. I think the rocking chairs on the front steps of Creighton Hall are significant for building community. Um, I think even the structures of some of these buildings allow for that, and I think students really want to engage. Um, and I feel like I want to engage. I think it's also a turning point in my life as a Christian. Was I thought to be a good Jesuit meant that I had to achieve. It's funny, even in the Jesuits, that a good Jesuit is in charge of a certain work, or pastor of a parish, or president of a high school. And people will ask me, like, "What are your dreams for yourself?" Um, and I used to have these great dreams, and I think that even I felt the pressure that I think our students feel of, like, a good Jesuit is successful, and I don't think that that's actually true. I think a good Jesuit is one that loves God and loves God's people, and, while that sounds really cliche and simple, it's really hard to live, and I feel like actually this place allows me. I would like to say that's my natural posture, but I would say that the students actually evoke that out of me and call me into, "Can you just stay and talk with me?" So I think yeah, I wish I would say, like, this is my way of being. I think it's been coached into me in responding to those things that we talked about earlier, that what the students really need at this point in their life is just to say, "My grandfather died. Can you pray for me?" Or, "I'm having a hard week. Can we just talk?" Yeah, they call that out of me to respond in that way.
On a lighter note, the rocking chairs are really cool.
They are really cool.
Is that where you like to hang out more?
I wish I did more, yeah, but I do. I find it fun. I find it fun to walk up there and to sit with students,
Yeah.
or to tease, and oftentimes they'll like, "Go get your computer and sit with us," and I'll be like, "Okay," maybe for like 2 minutes, I'll sit and chill for a little bit.
Well, I imagine you probably spend a lot of time in your new residence as well, that your own adult Jesuit residence.
Sure.
You mentioned it earlier. I mean, speaking of a place of community, that seems to sort of invite that same sense, I would think.
Yeah,
It's a really beautiful building.
yeah, and I probably will get in trouble for saying this, but I say to students all the time, I'm like, they'll stop me and they're like, "Hey, do you think there's a chance we could see the building?" And I'm like, "Let's go now," or "Just invite yourself over, like, just put it on my calendar." I do feel like the future for us as Jesuits, maybe back to the initial question you asked, the future for us as Jesuits is to really use this beautiful space as a place of hosting, because we're not like we used to be where we had 60 guys out everywhere. I think we're actually gonna have to bring people into that space, and to have lunches and dinners, and to use the chapel to pray with and for people. Um, it's gonna be a change, whereas we used to go out. I think we're having to learn how to invite people in and to use the house as a way of building community, and I think that would be a bit of a sea change for us. We're even as Jesuits, we're built to go out in the world, and now it's almost like we're inviting you to come in. So I'm really hopeful and excited about the potential of this new community, especially as we learn how to use it as a way of being hospitable and bringing people from the community in and sharing stories.
For those who haven't been inside, what's your favorite? Do you have a favorite spot?
Yeah, it's a really niche part of the building. It's in the chapel. If you go in, the chapel is, for those that haven't seen it, it's about 270 degrees of glass all around. And there's a nook or corner where it's to the northeast, and it looks down to North Omaha. And I guess I never realized how steep that hill is. It's a pretty steep hill, and I didn't realize how green uh, Omaha is as a city. And then you look and you see how far it stretches. And I think that it reminds me of how large the city is and our response to go into the greater world. And similarly, that chapel, you look and it's all glass. And I like to say it invites us to, as we're praying and standing at the altar, to look out to Graves, to look out to Harper, to pray for the students. I see my colleagues at 7:15, 7:30 as we're having mass, like walking into work, and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to pray for Robbie, or I need to pray for Cindy, or, it's like, oh, these, or I need to pray for these students. So
Yeah, you have a great view of the parking lot too. So if you
yeah,
wanted to sit at the window, they kind of spot
that's right.
everyone.
That's right. In the sunrise.
The sunrise is good.
I think our building, yeah, I guess I haven't thought about this much, but it invites us to look out as much as it was jokingly said that there's so much light or so much windows that people can look in. It invites us actually to look out into the world in which we're called to serve.
Can you give us sort of a, I don't know if there is ever a typical day
Sure.
for you, but um, you preside over mass. You mentioned
Yeah,
so do you do a morning mass, and then I thought you were also presiding over the candlelight mass.
good questions. Yeah, so we as a community have morning mass every day at 7:15. I would say my and I'm learning my adjustments and rhythms and what I can do and what I could do at 40 that I can't do at 44. Uh, 6 hours of sleep I could do. I can't quite do that anymore.
4 years, really? That's what we have.
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody said that's the big change, 44. Uh, so I would say the typical day would be getting up around 6:30, getting a cup of coffee, praying with the scripture and readings. I actually do my exam in a pretty lengthy one in the morning, and I go back over the day before and look for graces. Uh, and then I've shifted my schedule a little bit so that I'm coming in the office about 9:30, but I'll do some pre-email work before I go in, and then 9:30, and then it's like hit the door running. There's typically meetings with students or spiritual direction, meetings in campus ministry, and then the evenings, and then I'll usually have lunch. Not always, but often I'd say 2 or 3 times a week, lunch with a student or faculty, staff, or group of people, and then have dinner, work till about 6, and then have dinner, and then there might be some evening programming, and or if there'll be a mass. I usually preside at the 9 p.m. mass on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, so it's a full day, and yeah, I have to remind myself that it's awesome to serve. It's awesome to be in the community, but I need to also make time for God and for myself. And I'm not, maybe I'm overly generous with my time that I don't. I'm overly generous to people that I'm maybe not always generous to God, and so making that intentional.
That's a good reminder for all of us,
Yeah, yeah,
actually.
yeah, yeah.
So we can get kind of wrapped up in our work responsibilities,
Yeah,
family.
I think I've been challenged too. Like there might even be uh, a false generosity in that. Like I want to constantly be with people. I want to constantly be with people that as Jesuits, we resoundingly say the first thing to go in our life is actually prayer, because you can't, you have to make time for people and you have to make time for work. And but so what's the thing that oftentimes goes first is prayer. I think that's a problem that, or a challenge that most of us have faced. That how do you keep that time with God? And it's funny how we say God is the center of our life, and yet I feel like, well, God understands, so God can deal with me only talking to God for 5 minutes today, and I think for a day or two that's okay, but imagine any other relationship where you do that, like,
I immediately thought about my wife. Yeah.
exactly, the most important relationship in your life, and then it's like, I can give you 5 minutes today. Well, we say that God's the most important relationship in our life, and yet we give a minute or two or five. Um, and not that, we can say, well, does God really need that? I would say maybe God doesn't need it, but we need it. We need it.
Yeah. Yeah. As an alum,
Yeah.
what sticks out? I mean, you've experienced Creighton from a student's perspective, and now you kind of have a different viewpoint of it. What's different? What is different about Creighton in the I don't well, you actually already did reveal your age.
Yeah.
I wasn't going
Yeah. 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 Class of '03.
yeah,
I'm 44.
over 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously the buildings, campus looks different, but
Yeah.
does it feel different?
Yeah. It feels more global, or at least more national. What do I mean by that? It felt like when I got here, we were a bunch of hardworking, earnest Midwesterners who were coming to school here. And I think the facilities, I think the opportunities are much more robust. I think not only where people are coming from is more diversified, but who's coming here and what they're looking for is more diversified. And I think that adds a really beautiful richness to the campus. It felt a little more homogenous when I was here. I think there's a deeper richness. Um, and I think then maybe, I don't want to say challenge, the invitation is how then, noticing that there are more students that are maybe not Catholic or have no affiliation with Jesuit education or come here for a professional degree. How then do we infuse the mission to people where this is not woven into their being, but maybe something that they came to Creighton to for a professional degree or some other invitation, a scholarship. But now it's like, well, how do we share the mission deeply, and how do people um, start to own that? That would be, but I think largely the feel of Creighton feels very similar. The community, I think people would say, "What's your favorite part about Creighton?" Community, and I mean, I would even say go to far as, but I think people say that, but more deeply, what's more deeply part of community is this mission that I think people take on very seriously, and because of the mission, they want to build relationships with people, and then that fosters community. So I think that that's still very true here. Uh, I think we still have very earnest, hardworking people that comprise this place and are very generous and almost sacrificial. Take that for good or bad, but in terms of giving of themselves so generously to this place and to one another. So I think that's still here. I think it's also a good invitation to be a national brand, and people know. Or like when I came here, I don't think anybody knew where Creighton was or what Creighton was. And now it's like, oh, we know it's in Omaha. We know it has a good basketball program. We know it has top of the line medicine and healthcare and business. And so it went from being a very simple mom and pop shop to this national um, brand. And but what is beautiful and what we get to share that is unique to Creighton is the community, the earnestness, the deep the deep living out of the mission. I think that's what differentiates us.
I'm sure it's like this in other institutions too, but I think it's really neat that there are so many people who either went to Creighton or who have just worked at Creighton
Yeah.
for many years. It's just like I don't know, that tradition of culture and sort of the atmosphere on campus is kind of passed along because there are so many people who have lived it and lived here
Uh,
and been. been here. So
And I think people want to come back and give what was given to them. And also not just unilaterally give back what was given to them, but also to continue to be a part of the community. Um, that it's not like once you've graduated, then you're only giving down, but rather I'm still part of this place that is given to me and I'm giving back. And there's more of a relationship in it as opposed to a transactional, I'm giving back because it was given to me. It's more of like, I love this place and want to see it thrive. And I want people that are like me to thrive. And I want people who wouldn't normally have access to this place. I want to bring them in and help them thrive too. So I do feel like it's more of a sharing of the beauty of what God's doing through this place.
great. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for answering the tough questions and the silly ones.
Yeah, thank you.
Pretty silly.
No. And John, you're such a delightful conversation partner. It's so enjoyable. So thanks for inviting me to do this.
Appreciate it. Well, maybe we'll do it again.
Yeah, this sounds great.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of From the Mall. We hope you enjoyed it, and we can't wait to see you again next time.